أشراف مطلوب وطالبه لله أكرام من يمشي على قدم. العلم نور مبين يستضيء به أهل السعادات والجهال في الظلم.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. طيب, what is al-ijma'? Don't look at the books. إجماع اصطلاحا اتفاق مجتهدي هذه الأمة في عصر من العصور على حكم شرعي بعد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على حكم شرعي. طيب, we took some of the evidences of al-ijma'. The Shaykh says rahimahullah, al-ijma' hujjah. What evidences did he mention rahimahullah to prove ijma' is a hujjah? Excellent. So the mahal shahid from that verse, فإن تنازعتم في شيء, the mahal shahid or wajh dalala, point of evidence, which is no. So the verse tells us that if you differ in anything, then return it back to Allah Jalla wa Ala and His Messenger. The understanding of the hadith, the verse, is if you don't differ, then there's no need to return it back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, because you already know the hukum. And that is ijma'. طيب, what else? لا تجتمع أمتي على الضلال. طيب, excellent. Obviously there's whether it's authentic or not, there's a lot of khilaf over it. نعم ومن شاقق الرسول من بعد ويتبع غير سبيل المؤمنين. So the sabil of the mu'mineen is what? Is the haqq, it is that which they agree upon. طيب. So today inshallah we're going to start with anwa' al-ijma' and then 2 or 3 masail that are often talked about with ijma', and then we're going to move over to qiyas bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. The Shaykh says rahimahullah, anwa' al-ijma'. طيب, after giving us the ta'rif of ijma' and then telling us that it is a hujjah, he now rahimahullah is going to tell us that it is of 2 types. Once he tells us it's of 2 types, he's then going to go into different masail that the scholars talk about in the books of Usul al-Fiqh. And you will often find that, for example, let's say we're مثلا our book now, Usul al-Usul. In ijma', you'll always get the definition, the types, maybe the conditions, and then you will get 1 or 2 or 3 different masail pertaining to ijma'. Likewise, qiyas. You get the ta'rif, the types of qiyas, and then 2 or 3 matters or issues or more relating to qiyas. And the same goes for al-amr, the same goes for nahi, as you remember. The only difference is as the books get longer, the mutawwalats, the books that are slightly longer, they talk about more masail. Like in the core foundations or the core masail are found in every book. طيب. Like where do they differ between the mukhtasarat and the mutawwalat, the short books and the mutawwalat? The more masail that they mention and the more khilaf that they mention. So the Shaykh says rahimahullah, al-ijma'u naw'ani, ijma' that we've just clarified and established that it is a proof, it is of 2 types. There's ijma'un qat'iyyun and ijma'un dhanni. Ijma'un qat'iyyun and ijma'un dhanniyun. Then he explains each one. So qat'i means that ijma' which there's no difference of opinion over. It's like a given fact that there's an ijma' and it is qat'i. There's no kalam after it. There's no statements after it and no opinions or no research after it. As long as we've established it, khalas, that is proof. And the dhanni is that khilaf, or that ijma' afwan, that is there. However, how did we come to know of it? By research and by looking up. by research and by looking up. So the Shaykh says رحمه الله ما يعلم وقوعه من الأمة بالضرورة كالإجماع على وجوب الصلوات وتحريم الزنا وعلى تحريم الزنا وهذا النوع لا أحد ينكر ثبوته ولا كونه حجة. طيب ويكفر مخالفه إذا كان ممن لا يجهله. طيب the Shaykh says رحمه الله, he mentions a few different masail under the qat'i. The first and foremost is, what is the qat'i? ما يعلم وقوعه من الأمة بالضرورة, that which is known بالضرورة. Anyone that knows anything from the Quran and the Sunnah will know that this is something that is mujma' alayh, that there is ijma' on it, consensus. For example, the 5 daily prayers the Shaykh mentions rahimahullah. The 5 daily prayers. Every single Muslim that you go to will tell you, if you say to them, how many times a day do Muslims pray? What will they say to you? 5. Although in reality, it might be more than 5, because they might pray witr, tarawih, salatul duha, tahiyatul masjid, the sunan. However, when you say they pray salah, how many times a day? You will say what? 5. So it is ijma' like that, and there's no khilaf on it, around it. Then also zina, the fact that zina is muharram, every single person knows this. Every single Muslim who has the smallest amount of understanding knows that zina is haram. Why? Because it is constantly being said in lectures, in muhadarat, during reminders and so on. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, what is the benefit of this? He says, هذا النوع, that نوع, لا أحد ينكره. No one actually denies it or contradicts that. So you won't find someone saying to you, لا, that's not wajib, 5 times a day is not wajib. Unless obviously he's a person that has accepted Islam recently. And that's understandable, as we shall see in a second. Like no one will say the salah is not wajib. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, وَيَكْفُرُ مُخَالِفُهُ. The mukhalif of it, يَكْفُرُ مُخَالِفُهُ, the mukhalif, the one that opposes it, يَكْفُرُ, he becomes a kafir over it. Opposes what? And he says, مثلا, the 5 daily prayers are not wajib. You guys just think it is wajib. Or zina is not haram. Or zina is only haram if there's no consent. Like if there is consent, it is not haram, it's permissible, it's enjoyment. So if a person says that, then they are a kafir. إِذَا كَانَ مِمَّنْ لَا يَجْهَلُهُ. إِذَا كَانَ مِمَّنْ لَا يَجْهَلُهُ. If that person is from those people that it's not possible for him to say, he didn't know. مثلا, a Muslim that lives in the city, that is around students of knowledge, that is around mashayikh and so on, that is attending the masjid all the time, it's impossible for him to say, I didn't know salah wasn't wajib. I didn't know salah was wajib. It is impossible for them to say that. And the benefit of that is that if a person denies this, don't forget, pay attention, there's a difference between if a person contradicts this and a person denies this. There's 2 different things. If a person contradicts it and denies that it is wajib, or denies that it is haram, meaning zina or alcohol, then they are a kafir for that. Because they have disbelieved in something ma'loom min ad-dini bid-darura. You might want to write that ibarah down. So next to ijma' qat'i, write a, after the ta'rif of it, write a ma'loom min ad-din bid-darura. A ma'loomun من الدين بالضرورة. معلوم من الدين بالضرورة. Meaning that it is something which is known. And if anyone contradicts that, then they become a kafir. طيب. The second mas'ala that I said was mukhalafa. If a person is not, for example, falls into it, lakin they acknowledge that it is haram. مثلا, they drink alcohol, they say, may Allah guide me, and I know it's haram, then that is mukhalafa. It is not inkar, that is mukhalafa. Okay? And that mukhalafa doesn't make him a kafir. So where the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وَيَكْفُرُ مُخَالِفُهُ, the one that does mukhalafa of it, what he means obviously is munkiruhu. So mukhalifuhu, right on top of them, a munkiruhu, the one that denies it. Because mukhalafa means the one that opposes it. So a person can oppose it but still believe that it is haram and fall into sin. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, وَالظَّنِّ, As for the dhanni, so that type of ijma' there's no khilaf over. As for the dhanni, لا, on top of ويكفر مخالفه. لا, we explained إذا كان ممن لا يجهل. مثلا, for example, a person lives in a city and he's always around students and hearing the khutbah and so on. Like if a person accepted Islam now, and مثلا we see him in Ramadan, he accepts Islam 2 weeks before Ramadan, and we see him during Ramadan, and we see him مثلا drinking water. And so what are you doing? He says, I thought it was only food we weren't allowed to drink, to eat. But I thought water was okay. Is that possible for him to have that understanding? Naam, it's possible. So we excuse him, we tell him how the correct ruling, and then khalas. Lakin a person that's مثلا been around Muslims for the last 50 years says, well, I didn't know we weren't allowed to drink. Is that acceptable? So that is the meaning, that كان ممن لا يجهله. Then the Shaykh says رحمه الله والظني ما لا يعلم إلا بالتتبع والاستقراء. As for the ijma' that is dhanni, that is known through research. It is dhanni. Okay? What is it? It is that which لا يعلم ما لا يعلم إلا بالتتبع. After following up and researching and looking into the different evidences, then you realize it is ijma'. And then the Shaykh says وقد اختلف العلماء في إمكان ثبوته. طيب. So after giving the definition, where the Shaykh says وقد اختلف العلماء, write a subtitle حكم ثبوت الإجماع. A subtitle on the side, حكم ثبوت الإجماع. Or you can write هل يمكن وقوع الإجماع. هل يمكن وقوع الإجماع. Is it possible for ijma' to actually happen? طيب. So this is one of those masail. One of those masail that he's got to mention. And this mas'ala is it even possible for ijma' to happen? Is it possible for ijma' to happen? You with me, yeah? طيب. The Shaykh says رحمه الله وقد اختلف العلماء في إمكان ثبوته. So there's khilaf whether ijma' can actually take place or not. Okay? And he's going to mention 3 aqwal. وأرجح الأقوال. لا, the Shaykh doesn't mention the different opinions. Lakin he only mentions the stronger opinion. Why does he mention the stronger opinion? طبعا because it is a kitab that is what? مختصر. طيب. Lakin the first opinion is, you can write it down inshallah. طيب. So write this on your notes or on the book, and it is outside of the masala. The first scholars, they say that it is possible that it can happen. It is possible أي أنه يمكن وقوعه في جميع الأزمنة. It is possible that ijma' takes place في جميع الأزمنة, throughout every century. That's the first opinion. So they say it is possible for ijma' to happen during the time of the companions, during the time of the tabi'in, during the time of the atba' tabi'in, and throughout the centuries. It is possible. And the evidence is what? All of the evidences that show ijma' is possible. Their evidence is all of the evidence that show ijma' is possible. The second opinion is لا يمكن وقوعه. It is not possible for ijma' to happen. It is not possible for ijma' to even happen. And why is it not possible, ya jama'ah? They say لا يمكن وقوعه. لا هذا نعم, they used that as an example where Imam Ahmed said whoever says that there's ijma' then he's a kadhib. Lakin that statement of Imam Ahmed should be, the scholars they differ in how to interpret it. Why? Because Imam Ahmed says whoever claims that there's ijma' then he has lied. However, at times we find, they say the scholars, Imam Ahmed using ijma' as proof. So Imam Ahmed is not denying the existence of ijma', because if he denied it, he wouldn't use it as proof. Lakin he's saying that it is difficult to know, And they also say he wants to let people know not to be real easy and lenient in narrating ijma' and saying that there's ijma' on this mas'ala. So the second opinion, they say it's not possible. Why? Because they say it is impossible for the mujtahidun to come together in one place and to agree upon one mas'ala. Because they live in many different places. So how is it possible that we give every one of them this specific mas'ala and we know their opinion in this mas'ala as well? And there's, مثلا, in the whole ummah, the ulama of the ummah, the mujtahidun, are not in one place. They're what? Spread all across the ummah, across the world. Therefore, how can they come together in one place? And it's not possible to know their opinions. And the third opinion that the Shaykh rahimahullah mentions is the stronger opinion, is that it is possible for ijma' يمكن أن يقع أو أن الإجماع ممكن في زمن الصحابة رضوان الله عليهم أن الإجماع ممكن في زمن الصحابة. It is possible during the time of the Sahaba. And then write why. And then write alif. And then write alif. Because number one, the mujtahidun are not many. مثلا, during the time of the Sahaba, it was known who were the most knowledgeable ones, those that spent time with the Prophet ﷺ and so on. So the mujtahidun weren't a lot during that time. But they were known. They were known. Jim, it is possible to know their opinion. So because of these two masail, the fact that they were known and they weren't many, it is jim possible to know their opinion on any one mas'ala. It is possible to know their opinion in any one mas'ala. Dal, it also happened. So how do we know it happened during the time or how do we know that it can happen during the time of the Prophet, the companions? لِوُقُوعِهِ فِي زَمَنِ الصَّحَابَةِ, لأن it happened during the time of the companions. Because they agreed on many things. For example, the writing of the Mus'haf, or the compiling of the Mus'haf rather. And then compiling it into the Mus'haf al-Uthmani. And Salat al-Tarawih being in congregation. And the inheritance of the grandmother being what? Sudus if there's no mother. Naam. So these three opinions are the opinions in this mas'ala. And then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, the third one is the one that he says وَأَرْجَحُ الْأَقْوَالِ فِي ذَلِكَ رَأْيُ الشيخ الإسلام بن تيمية رحمه الله. رأي الشيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية رحمه الله حيث قال في الواسطية الإجماع والإجماع الذي ينضبط ما كان عليه سلف الصالح. So he says the strongest opinion is the third opinion, and it is the opinion that Shaykh al-Islam rahimahullah took or adopted. And he says in Wasatiyya, one of the books of Shaykh al-Islam, والإجماع and the ijma' الذي ينضبط, that we're able to put a finger to and understand and comprehend, is ما كان عليه السلف الصالح, that which the Salaf al-Salih were on. إذ بعدهم كثر الاختلاف وانتشرت الأمة. Why is it during the time of the companions or the time of the Salaf? Because after them, he says rahimahullah, كثر الاختلاف. اختلاف was a lot into the Ummah. And انتشرت الأمة, and every person went to different directions. So there were mujtahidun in Baghdad, in Hijaz, in Sham, and so on. So it is impossible. And obviously they didn't have wasa'il tawasul that we have now that can easily let them know what the other mujtahid was upon. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, he's now mentioning another mas'ala. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ لَا يُمْكِنُ أَن تَجْمَعَ عَلَى خِلَافٍ. طيب. As a side mas'ala, right, on the وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ, see where it says there? Right on the side, هل يمكن أن تجتمع هل يمكن, is it possible? هل يمكن, is it possible? أن تجتمع, that the ummah comes together and has consensus على خلاف دليل صحيح, على خلاف دليل صحيح. So that is the mas'ala on the side. And the meaning of that is it possible that we have a verse from the Quran of Allah Jalla wa Ala or the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then we have an ijma', and then that ijma' contradicts this verse? Is it possible to have that? يقول الشيخ, he says رحمه الله, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ, and know that the ummah لا يمكن أن تجتمع على خلاف دليل صحيح صريح غير منسوخ. He says غير منسوخ. He says على دليل, it is impossible that the ummah تجتمع, that they gather together and they come together and have consensus على خلاف, in contradiction to دليل, a dalil which is sahih, underline that, which is sahih, authentic, sarih, number 2, write 2 on top of that, sarih, meaning clear cut. The evidence in the mahal shahid is clear and it is clear cut. There's no khilaf in it. غير منسوخ, number 3, write 3 on top of that, which hasn't been abrogated. Okay, so the Shaykh saying it is not possible that the ummah can come together and oppose a dalil sarih, that is clear, that hasn't been abrogated. Why? فإنها لا تجتمع إلا على الحق. Why? Because it is not possible that they have consensus except in haqq. They can only have consensus in something that is haqq. Is that understood? Then the Shaykh says, وَإِذَا رَأَيْتَ إِجْمَاعًا, and if you see an ijma', تَظُنُّهُ مُخَالِفًا لِذَلِكَ, if you see an ijma' which opposes that, which opposes what? The dalil that is sahih, فَانظُرْ, then pay attention. So now he's going to give you different possibilities. He's now going to give you different possibilities. Okay? He says, فَإِمَّا أَن يَكُونَ الدَّلِيلُ غَيْرَ صَحِيحٍ. Either the dalil is not authentic, طيب, أو غير صريح, or it is not clear, أو منسوخا, or it is not, or it has been abrogated, أو في المسألة خلاف لم تعلمه, or in the mas'ala there's a khilaf that you don't know, meaning there's no ijma', ijma'. And that is called sabr wa taqsim, as we've come across. So basically the Shaykh is saying, la, it is not possible that the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam can agree to contradict a clear verse or hadith. And if you do find that there's a ijma' that is correct, the ijma' that contradicts a hadith or verse, then it's one of 3 scenarios or 4. Either the dalil is not sahih, مثلا it's a weak hadith, or the hadith is sahih, lakin the evidencing is not clear. Maybe it could mean this, or maybe it could mean that. And that is what they call dhanniyu dalala. The way it is showing you, it is not qat'i, it is not firm. It could mean this, or it could mean that. Or, he says, rahimahullah, it is not clear, or mansukh, or it is abrogated, it has been changed. The hukum has been changed. Mathalan, let's say now we have ijma' of the ummah that men can go to the graveyard. Ijma' of the ummah that men can visit the graveyards. Is that understood? How about if we find the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said that he prohibited us from attending or going to the graveyard? It means that hadith is mansukh. It means that hadith is mansukh. طيب. So that is that masala that the Shaykh mentioned, rahimahullah. طيب, come on.
You see when it comes to hadith al-sarih, how can ijma' happen on something that's ghayr sarih? So I understand if the ijma', because he says here, إذا رأيت إجماعا تظنه مخالفا لذلك فانظر.
نعم.
He says على أن لا يمكن أن تجمع على خلاف دليل صحيح صريح. Meaning also the khilaf happens if it's not sarih.
The ijma' happens if it's not sarih, he's saying. According to here.
So how can ijma' happen if something that's not sarih? It's not the dalil itself. No, I know, but the sarah comes from the fahm, right?
Now, we have an ijma', okay? That ijma', let's say it is, we've affirmed that it is ijma'. Someone might say to you, but it opposes that hadith. However, the one that established the ijma' will say, la, it doesn't oppose that, because what you're pointing to this hadith doesn't even show it.
So the ghayr sarih is the one that opposes the ijma'.
The one that opposes the ijma'. Na'am, the one that opposes the ijma'. Because here you've got 4 scenarios. You've got an ijma'. Put ijma' here. The first scenario is that it opposes a hadith that is what? That is, let's say if it opposes a hadith that is weak, khalas, the ijma' is clear. If it opposes an evidence that is authentic, but the way of evidencing is not clear, then we have an ijma' here, but it hasn't opposed a dalil. This dalil isn't clear, so it hasn't opposed the dalil. It is muhtamil on this and then on that. And then they have ijma' over one of the masail in that we mentioned in that hadith. But it is not to say that it contradicted the hadith. That's the whole mas'ala that the Shaykh is saying. That is a good point that you mentioned. Jazakallah khair. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, now he's going to move on to ijma'. Now he's going to move on to the next mas'ala, which is shurut al-ijma'. Shurut al-ijma'. As you know, obviously everything's got shurut. Al-ijma'u, نعم, للإجماع الشروط, the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, منها أن يثبت بطريق صحيح. طيب. The first condition, he's only going to mention 2. The first condition is, number 1, it has to be أن يثبت بطريق صحيح. We actually have to know that it is ijma'. You can't just say, you know what, I looked at Usul min ilm al-Usul, and there's ijma' that the best book to teach for Usul al-Fiqh is al-Usul min ilm al-Usul. How can you say that there's ijma' in that mas'ala? So the ijma', he says, it has to be بطريق صحيح. Okay? It has to come through the correct way. It has to be established in the correct way. What is the correct way? He says, بأن يكون إما مشهورا بين العلماء. The first way is that it is mashhur bayn al-ulama. It is common knowledge among the scholars. It is something which is common knowledge among the scholars. طيب? And no one will oppose it. مثلا تكملة الثلثين. If we find مثلا a bint, a am, and bint ibn, the bint will get what? Nisf, half. The am will get what? Baqi. What about the bint al-ibn? Huh? لا سدس تكملة الثلثين. سدس تكملة الثلثين. Excellent. طيب. There's ijma' that she gets that. There's ijma' among the scholars that she gets that. And that is مشهور بين العلماء. So that is the first way. أو يعني أن يكون ناقله ثقة واسع الاطلاع. Or the naqil of it, the naqil of what? The ijma'. The one that is saying there's ijma'. أجمع العلماء على كذا. The imam that is narrating that, he is the imam. مثلا شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية, مثلا إمام ابن قدامة, مثلا إمام النووي رحمه الله. These sorts of imams, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Ahmed, they're imams who we can rely upon when they say أجمع العلماء على كذا. لماذا؟ لأنه ماذا؟ ثقة واسع الاطلاع. واسع الاطلاع means that he's aware of all of the different opinions in the mas'ala, and he's aware of all of the scholars that have opposed it and all of the scholars that have agreed with it and so on. So he will know whether there's the ijma' or whether there's a khilaf. So if there's a khilaf, he won't say there's ijma' in the mas'ala, because he knows there's a khilaf. Like, that only happens after a person reads a lot, looks into the books of, مثلا, all of the books of Ahl Ilm and so on. So, مثلا, if you get a person, and if you find a person and he's only read the book of the Shafi'iyah, the books of the Shafi'iyah in fiqh, مثلا, is it possible for him to say, لا أجمع العلماء على كذا? لا, it's not possible. Yes, it's possible that he says, أجمع علماء الشافعية على كذا, that the ulama of the Shafi'iyah, they're in agreement over this, and there's no khilaf within the madhab, like he can't say أجمع العلماء. So that is the first way. It has to be affirmed through a dariq, a correct way, transmitted in a correct way. And correct way consists of what? Two ways, which are either it is mashhur, something which is common and well known among the scholars, or the one that is narrating is thiqa, is an imam, a alim, that is aware of all of the khilaf in the ummah, or that is aware if there's khilaf in this masala or not. That is the first condition. Right. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah, the الشرط الثاني, the second one, ألا يسبقه خلاف مستقر فإن سبقه ذلك فلا إجماع لأن الأقوال لا تبطل بموت قائلها. طيب. This condition, right on the side of that condition, on the right side of it, طيب, right, الاتفاق بعد الخلاف. So we've got a condition, and within that condition he talks about the mas'ala. So just write the title. الاتفاق بعد الاختلاف. يقول الشيخ رحمه الله ألا يسبقه خلاف مستقر. خلاف مستقر. So we have an ijma', okay? He says that khilaf cannot come under, or that ijma' cannot come under a khilaf that has been established. An ongoing established khilaf. And in order to understand this, I want you to write three types of ijma'. Three types of ijma'. Number one, إجماع جديد لم يسبق بخلاف أو لم يسبقه خلاف. لم يسبقه خلاف. إجماع جديد لم يسبقه خلاف. That means an ijma' that is new, and there was no khilaf in this mas'ala. This is the first time we've talked about this mas'ala. مثلا, let's say there's 100 of us here, and we're the only mujtahidun in this ummah, okay, in this century. And a new mas'ala comes, Bitcoin مثلا. None of the scholars in the past came across this mas'ala, right? Cryptocurrencies. We, as the 100 mujtahidun of this ummah, we come together that it is halal or that it is haram. So we have an ijma'. This ijma' that we have, the mas'ala that we've agreed upon, is it a new mas'ala or an old mas'ala? New mas'ala. So the scholars of the past, they might not have had ijma' in this. Okay, even if it did exist, they did not have ijma' in it. And they did not differ in it. So it is a brand new mas'ala, and we have ijma'. That is called ijma' jadid. خلاص. صح? طيب. The second is إجماع سبقه خلاف. إجماع سبقه خلاف لم يستقر ولكن لم يستقر. إجماع سبقه خلاف لكنه لم يستقر. And that is ijma' that there was khilaf over. There was khilaf over this mas'ala. However, that khilaf did not last long. For example, the khilaf of who's going to be the khalifa after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. At the beginning, there was a little bit of khilaf between the Sahaba. That's why Quraysh said, we take what the Muhajirun said, we choose one from our side, and the Muhajirun we choose from one side, and so on. Lakin the ijma' quickly came after that, which was what? That Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would become the what? The Khalifa after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is that understood? Also, they differed where to bury the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then Abu Bakr came and mentioned the hadith. So there was khilaf, wasn't there? So they had ijma', but before that ijma' that they agreed upon, there was khilaf. But that khilaf did not last long. Is that understood? طيب. And the last one is ijma'un سبقه خلاف. إجماع سبقه خلاف مستقر. إجماع سبقه خلاف مستقر. And that is an ijma', a consensus among the scholars. سبقه خلاف. Like before that consensus there was a khilaf. Right? However, that khilaf became mustaqir, it became established. It became established. It wasn't just 10, 20 minutes or 2 days or 2 weeks or 1 year or 2 years. So that khilaf existed and then there was an ijma'. Is that understood? So right next to it, وَهَذَا مَوْضِعُ الْخِلَافِ. وَهَذَا مَوْضِعُ خِلَافٍ. Is that understood, that third mas'ala? Who can repeat the third mas'ala? Just the third one. So there's an ijma' that happens. There was a khilaf before it. And then the ijma' came. لا.
So the consensus,
Close.
The consensus has occurred.
However, before that there was khilaf. And then what?
And then the consensus.
However, that khilaf was one that was mustaqir. مثلا, let's say the Sahaba had khilaf over a mas'ala in 2 opinions. Then that khilaf carried on until the time of the tabi'un. And then the tabi'un ajma'u ala ahad al-qawlayn. They had ijma' on one of these 2 opinions. Is this ijma' considered and taken into consideration, or is it not taken into consideration? Have you understood the surah al-mas'ala? The Sahaba مثلا had ijma', had khilaf. What 2 opinions? Na'am and la. Then the tabi'un came after 10, 20, 30 years later, and they had ijma', they agreed upon the fact that this one was the stronger opinion. Na'am is the stronger opinion مثلا. Do we take that consideration into? Do we take that ijma' into consideration? Do we say, la, now the tabi'un have made ijma', therefore we have to take that ijma'? What do you think?
Yes, because the same notice before saying that the Ummah will not unite upon.
Okay, so you're saying yes, we have to take that ijma' into consideration because the Ummah does not agree upon batil. Jade. Jayyid, excellent. Yes, we take that ijma' into consideration, but because it is one of those 2 opinions, okay?
You mentioned before that if 2 Sahabas differ, we can't introduce a new one. So it's ijma', like you said.
Nah. So you're saying that we take it into consideration because it is not a new ijma', it is not a new mas'ala that they've introduced, they've only agreed upon one of the masail. Taib, sisters, what do you think? It is taken into consideration. Why? It is taken into consideration because all of the general evidences that show the hujjiyah of ijma', the fact that it is proof.
I would say it is not because the khilaf in the Sahaba mujtahidun are not many.
The mujtahidun were not many.
Are not many. Therefore, it would stick more. The khilaf would stick more than in a time where the mujtahidun kufrun غير معلومين.
Okay, that's خارج محل النزاع. لكن we've established that the mujtahidun were not many and so on, but we're now talking about this ijma'. Is it taken into consideration or not?
Which ijma'?
Huh? The ijma' of the tabi'in. This was, I'm just saying as an example here, the ijma' of the tabi'een on
Because it's so, it is khilaf before in time of Sahaba, and you take it that ijma' can only be in time of Sahaba.
Khalas, forget, it's not, don't restrict yourself to a certain zaman. A period of time there was khilaf in any one mas'ala, and then in the next era, 30, 40 years later, there was ijma' on the mas'ala that there was previously khilaf. Yeah? Okay. Let's see what Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen says, rahimahullah. So he actually makes it to be a condition. He says, Allah yasbiqhu khilafun mustaqim. So he says one of the conditions for ijma' to even be taken into consideration is what? That there's no ijma' before it. That there's no khilaf before it. فإن سبقه ذلك فلا إجماع. Because if there's khilaf, there's no ijma'. طيب? Why though? Why? He says لأن الأقوال, because the opinions and the statements and the madhahib لا تبطل, it is not destroyed and nullified بموت قائلها, just because the person that was upon it died. Just because the person that died upon it, that was upon it and said it, died. He says فالإجماع, is that understood? So he's saying يا أخي طيب, مثلا you're saying the tabi'un agreed on a mas'ala. But are you saying that just because Abdillah ibn Abbas died, that we can't take his opinion into consideration? Are you saying because Imam Ahmed died and then the generation after him agreed upon something, that we can't take his opinion into consideration? So the Shaykh is saying it is a condition. We're going to get into it. Right? He says, فالإجماع إجماع لا يرفع الخلاف السابق. Ijma' doesn't remove the khilaf that was there before. Okay? وَإِنَّمَا, لكن what it does, or all it does, is يَمْنَعُ مِنْ حُدُوثِ خِلَافٍ, and you might want to add on top of that, جَدِيدٍ. Although you don't really need to, like, just so you can understand it quickly. مِنْ خِلَافٍ جَدِيدٍ. So Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen is saying, right, guys, we have a cut-off point. We have the past, the khilaf that took place in the past, we can't get rid of that khilaf and we can't have ijma' here. Because just because these great imams died, it don't mean we totally disregard their madhabs. However, a person might say, what is the benefit of a khilaf? What's the benefit of ijma' then? The benefit of that ijma' is, it doesn't allow there to be room for khilaf after that. So once we have this ijma' in the zaman of the tabi'een, for example, those that come after the tabi'een, they can no longer differ over a new opinion. لا لا يكفر الخلاف السابق وإنما يمنع من حدوث خلاف جديد. نعم. So there's a khilaf now, there's an ijma' on a new mas'ala. They can't now come with that khilaf, a khilaf to oppose this ijma'. Listen, before you ask questions, understand the mas'ala first. There's a khilaf that is sabiq. Let's say the Sahaba had khilaf. Then the Tabi'een came. Those Sahaba died when that khilaf existed. Is that understood? Okay? Then the current generation of the Tabi'een, they agreed upon an opinion. They say, he's saying, rahimahullah, we can't take that ijma' into consideration if it is to do with one of these masail that they differed over. Why? Because just because the Sahaba died, it doesn't mean we disregard their madhab. Not only the Sahaba, but any past generation. However, the benefit of ijma', he's saying, is that if we have ijma' on any one mas'ala, okay, that ijma' from there on is there and it is binding. No generation can come after that and say we're going to contradict this ijma'. Because the ijma', once it is established, it becomes what? Binding and hujjah, proof. Therefore no one can come after them. That's what he means, إِنَّمَا يَمْنَعُ مِنْ حُدُوثِ خِلَافٍ. Like it prevents from ijma' coming into it. Okay? هذا هو القول الراجح. He says, رحمه, that is the stronger opinion. لِقُوَّةِ مَأْخَذِهِ. Because of how? Because of the way that you're looking at it, or because it is strong in the sense that You cannot disregard the opinion of those that passed away. وَقِيلَ, and it is said, لَا يُشْتَرَطُ ذَلِكَ. It is also said that that is not a condition. Why? Okay. فَيَصِحُ, so it is permissible, أَن يَنْعَقِدَ فِي الْعَصْرِ الثَّانِي. It is possible that they have ijma' in the second era, على أحد الأقوال السابقة, that they agree upon one of the previous opinions. So that is the second opinion. وَيَكُونُ حُجَّةً عَلَى مَنْ بَعْدَهُ, and then it becomes proof upon those that come after it. Upon those that come after it. Is that understood?
You're saying there's a khilaf that's mu'tabar in terms of Sahaba, and now we've come in the era of Tabi'in, came with the ijma' upon one of those scholars, right? And in the second statement, he essentially saying the same thing.
No, it's the opposite. The Shaykh mentioned two opinions. The first, what did he make as a condition? He made it as a condition, Allah yasbiqu khilaf mustaqir, that there can't be a khilaf mustaqir. Okay? If there is a khilaf that is mustaqir, khalas. You can't now say, listen, we as the tabi'een, we agree upon one opinion and we're going to disregard that sahabi or those two sahaba and that opinion. He's saying, no, you can't. And he makes that's the stronger opinion. Then he says, وَقِيلَ, and if you ever come across, in most cases, قِيلَ refers to the weaker opinion. وَقِيلَ, and it is said, for example. وَقِيلَ لَا يُشْتَغَضُ فَيَصِحُّ أَن يَنْعَقِدَ الْإِجْمَعِ. وَقِيلَ, it is not condition. It is not condition. Rather, we can come up with, not a third opinion. Rather, we can agree upon one of the two masail that there was khilaf over. We can agree. مثلا, let's say Abu Bakr and Uthman had a difference of opinion. Pay attention. Abu Bakr and Uthman had a difference of opinion. Khalas, bilash. Let's say Abdillah ibn Mas'ud and Abdullah ibn Abbas. Abdullah ibn Abbas says, Ya halal, wa Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says, Ya haram. Sah? And that khilaf was known among their students. Then, about 20-30 years later, all of the tabi'un, obviously the students of these individuals, all of the tabi'un agreed upon it being halal. Mathalan, the opinion of Abdullah ibn Abbas. This is the mas'ala that we're talking about. The two opinions is, the one that the Shaykh says, we can't have an ijma'. It is impossible to have an ijma' there and there. Why? Because aslan there was a khilaf in the mas'ala. Is that understood? However, he's saying, وَقِيلَ, and it is also said, that yes, we can establish this khilaf, this ijma', we can take it into consideration because, what? Because it is an ijma'. Is ijma' not proof? طيب. Bahta. Have you understood the surah al-mas'ala? طيب. So there are these two opinions. It is taken as ijma'. Why is it taken as ijma'? Because all of the evidences that show ijma'. In all of those evidences that you looked into ijma', did it say that there can't be a khilaf beforehand? No. فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى طيب. Does it say وَيَتَّبِعْ غَيْرَ سَبِيلِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ? Does it mention لَا تَجْتَمِعُ أُمَّتِي عَلَى طَاعَةٍ? Does it mention in any of these evidences that there can't be a previous ijma'? لا. It merely talks about what? Ijma' itself. So here, once we have ijma', khalas, that's enough for us. And then there's the second opinion that it does not count as ijma'. Why? Because al-madhahib la tabtulu aw la tamutu bi mawti qa'iliha, they say. And so they say, la, as Ibn Uthaymin is saying, la, we're not going to say there's ijma', it's not possible. We're going to say, because there was already a khilaf, we're not going to totally disregard their khilaf. Is that understood? Revise it, and then we'll go on to it, inshallah. If you have any questions, I'll go back to it next week. Lakin it's pretty simple. During the time of the Muslimin, there was khilaf. Then 30 years later, the scholars of that era agreed upon one opinion. Can we take that ijma' or that consensus into consideration? Yes or no? One opinion says you can take it into consideration because what we're looking at is what? The existence of ijma'. Here we have ijma', khalas. then the second opinion is that you can't take it into consideration, because if you do take that ijma' into consideration, then you're saying that this is not the khilaf that was before, we're not going to take it into consideration.
I understand that. What could you go over وإنما يمنع من حدوث?
Now, that is pretty straightforward, which is, did we not say ijma' is a hujjah? Ijma' is a hujjah. طيب, how many mujtahidun in this room now? Let's say 100 mujtahidun. We're the mujtahidun of the ummah. The ummah aslan consists of 200 people and 100 of us are mujtahidun. Understood? طيب. On today, what's the date today? طيب, fourth whatever. Today, which is a Saturday, in 2023, we agree upon a mas'ala, ijma'. We've all signed it, khalas. 10 years later, in the ummah, there was a young person who became a mujtahid. Can that mujtahid now oppose the khilaf? مثلا Bitcoin. We all say Bitcoin is halal. We agree that Bitcoin is halal. And there's ijma' and it's been established. 20 years later, a mujtahid comes about and says, La, Bitcoin is haram. Is it possible to do? No. Can he oppose our opinion? No, why not? Because ijma' is hujjah. So that is the meaning behind وَإِنَّمَا يَمْنَعُ. It only prevents the coming of a new khilaf. Understood? طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, he's now going to go into another mas'ala. Can you see where it says, وَلَا يُشْتَغَدْ عَلَى رَأْيِ الْجُمْهُورِ انْقِرَاضُ الْعَصْرِ? Is that understood? طيب. The Shaykh is saying, rahimahullah, that, I'll write as a side issue, as the title or the subtitle is, هل انقراض العصر شرط هل انقراض العصر شرط لثبوت الإجماع. So that is the title of this mas'ala. And this means, pay attention for 1 second. This means, okay, this mas'ala that the Shaykh is going to now go into, it goes like this. There's how many of us now? 100 mujtahidun in this room. Don't forget the number. 100 mujtahidun in this room. The ummah consists of, let's say, 300 people. 200 are outside, they are not mujtahidun. Us 100 are mujtahidun. We agree upon a mas'ala. Give me a new mas'ala roughly. A nazila. IVF مثلا. IVF. What's the IVF? That fertilizing. Yeah, طيب. IVF مثلا. Us 100 mujtahidun, we say, Ya Jama'ah, IVF is halal because of X, Y, Z. And we had 5 meetings, 5 jalasat, 5 majalis, and we discussed the mas'ala in detail to the bone. After these 5 majalis, a week later, we did not go anywhere. For the whole week we were here. After 5 majalis, we do an i'lan and say, أجمعنا على كذا or اجتمعنا على كذا. We agree, all of us agree, and there's not a single one of us that opposes this, that it is halal due to X, Y, Z. We have an ijma', صح? طيب. The mas'ala that the Shaykh is talking about now is, when does that ijma' become binding? And there are 2 opinions. Pay attention. You're going to look in the book, like, and pay attention first. And there are 2 opinions. The first opinion says, or one of the opinions, that ijma' becomes binding as soon as we sign, as soon as we agree upon something. The minute we agree, أجمعنا على كذا, خلاص. From that moment, that ijma' becomes binding. And what does it mean, it becomes binding? no one يمنع من حدوث خلاف. It is not possible to oppose us. So one opinion is that it becomes binding the minute that we agree. Understood? خلاص. The next opinion is لا. We're going to say that it becomes binding when the very last mujtahid of you dies. When the last mujtahid dies, that is when it becomes binding. Why, ya jama'ah salamat? Why? They say because it's very well possible that any one of these mujtahideen changes his mind.
Could that be done for the ikhtilaf as well? So let's say that the 100 had the ikhtilaf and there was one person that said that I don't agree with the ijma'. Everyone dies apart from him, and then he says, actually, I want to agree with that ijma' that was present. Is he allowed to then, is that going to be counted as ijma' or?
Who can answer that? We answered that last week. We studied that last week. Is that even an ijma'?
Because he was the one.
It was him that opposed it. La, khalas, it's done. It's done. There was no ijma'. Because there was no ijma', there's nothing to go back to it now. طيب, so that is the masala that we've got at hand. Let's go into it. The Shaykh says, وَلَا يُشْتَغَضُ, and it is not a condition على رأي الجمهور, according to the majority of scholars, وَلَا يُشْتَغَضُ انقراض عصر المجمعين. انقراض عصر المجمعين. It is not a condition that every single one of us dies for that ijma' to be affirmed. فينعقد, rather it becomes binding. فينعقد الإجماع من أهله بمجرد اتفاقهم. Underline بمجرد اتفاقهم. فينعقد, that ijma' becomes binding بمجرد اتفاقهم, as the minute they agree. That's when it becomes binding. ولا يجوز, and it is not possible, it's not permissible, لهم ولا لغيرهم, it is not permissible for them مخالفته بعد. يعني بعد هذا. It is not possible for them to oppose that. لأن أدلة الإجماع, صورة المسألة, مثلا let's say we agreed upon what? IVF سواء, halal, صح? طيب. And then all of a sudden Abdurrahman says لا. 2 weeks later he goes, guys, you know what, I changed my mind. After looking at the evidences, خلاص, I don't think it is halal. Are we going to take his opinion into consideration? لا, we're not going to take him. The Shaykh says لا, we're not going to take his opinion into consideration. لأن الأدلة, because the evidence على الإجماع, على أن الإجماع حجة ليس فيها اشتراط انقراض العصر. Why are we not going to take his khilaf into consideration, Abdurrahman's khilaf? Because the adilla على أن الإجماع, the evidences that show that ijma' is a hujjah, does not mention that we all have to die. All it shows is that ijma' is proof. صح? The minute we have ijma', خلاص, done deal. The minute we have ijma', that is what we take into consideration. As long as there's ijma', we don't need to look at anyone else. Or say that you all have to die just in case you change your mind and so on and so forth. Is that understood? And then the Shaykh says, رحمه الله, ولأن الإجماع, and because الإجماع حصل ساعة اتفاقهم. When did the ijma' take place? The minute they agreed. The minute that they agreed. So he's saying there is ijma', but when? The minute that they agreed. فما الذي يرفعه? ما الذي يرفعه? What will lift that ijma'? Nothing. We can't have a khilaf. Is that understood? Lakin those scholars that say you can. Or have you understood the mas'ala? Who can explain it? Or sisters, who can explain this mas'ala? It's very short. So this is the mas'ala. When does the ijma' become established, binding? طيب. The first opinion is the moment they agree, khalas. From there onwards it is binding. Why? Because the evidences that show ijma' is a hujjah become wajib at that particular time. طيب. When the last mujtahid dies. Why? Because they say what? That you can change, one of those mujtahideen can what? Can change their qawl. They can change their opinion and say, la, I don't agree with that ijma'. طيب. What is the thamara of this khilaf? The thamara of this khilaf, there are two thamaras of this khilaf. Okay? The first ijma' or the first thamara of this khilaf is that once that ijma' becomes binding, it is not possible for the mujtahid to go back on his ijma'. It is not possible for any one of us or any one of the mujtahideen to oppose the ijma'. That is the first benefit of it. So pay attention here. Mathalan, let's say we adopt the first opinion. The first opinion is what? That it becomes binding the minute we agree. If we take that opinion, Mubarak can't come back to us 2 weeks later and say, Ya Jama'ah, I disagree with you. Why? خلاص يا أخي أنت محجوج بالإجماع, we'll say. There's ijma', so go. However, if we go on the second opinion, which is what? Until we die, if we say that our ijma' doesn't become binding until the last one of us dies, then Mubarak can come and say, La, you know what? I come back on this ijma' and I don't agree with the ijma'. And we have to take his khilaf into consideration. Sah? Why? Because we're all mujtahidun and he's a mujtahid and he opposes this mas'ala. Why before that though? Because there's no ijma'. Is that understood? That's the first thamara. The second thamara is, if we say that ijma' is established the second that we agree, then no new mujtahid can now come and say, I oppose you. Mathalan, let's say 30 years later, let's say we agree upon the age, let's say we're all 50. 20 years later, alhamdulillah, we're still alive. What are we? 70, sah? But during the time of our ittifaq, there was a student of knowledge, mashallah, became a mujtahid, and then all of a sudden he says, Ya ajaiz, or you old people, أنا أخالفكم, I disagree with you في هذه المسألة. فهمت? Do you understand? We have a new mujtahid. Right? That new mujtahid says, you know what, I disagree with these old men. If we say to him, if we take the first opinion, which is what? It becomes binding the second we agree, we're going to say to him, Ya salam, you shab, khalas. You're young, it's too late, you missed the train. So we don't take his khilaf into consideration. However, if we say that ijma' becomes binding the minute we die, then as long as we're alive, he can now come in, as long as he becomes mu'ahal lil ijtihad, as long as he becomes a person that is able to do ijtihad, he can oppose us. Sah? Why can he oppose us? Okay, because he's a mujtahid, but there's no ijma'. There's no ijma'. It's not about possibility, it's not because we're alive, but because there's no ijma'. Is that understood? So these two thamarat are there. Sah? Huh? لا, okay, I'll let you ask questions now. Go on, quickly, because there's only one masala left after this.
Because if you take the first opinion that the ijtihad becomes munaqid at that time,
the ijma' becomes munaqid at that time.
yeah. So what if all 100 change their opinion? That's the first scenario. The second scenario is, what if another 100 come and oppose them? Because if you
let's take the first possibility. You said, what if all 100 oppose that opinion? They can't. Why? Because the ijma' is already there. وهل تجتمع الأمة على ضلالة؟ لا. So they can't. Whether it's 1 or 20 or 30 or 40, they can't oppose that ijma' based on this khilaf.
So couldn't it be like مثلا طب hadith, new technology that comes and something becomes clear to them, and then they all agree based on this new information?
Like based on another, شوف, practically when you're applying it, then that's something else, maybe. Like when you're looking at another, it is not possible, because it is not possible that they aslan get together and agree upon something that is batil. The second masala that you said,
No, the second point is, does that not close the door for any ijtihad to come ever after that, or any mujtahid.
So does that close? So you're saying does that not close the door for ijtihad? No, it doesn't close the door for ijtihad. It closes the door for ijtihad in that particular mas'ala. So مثلا we said, what was our mas'ala? IVF, صح? طيب, it closes the door for IVF. Lakin, Forex, for example, or Bitcoin, someone can't say that because the scholars agreed upon IVF, then we can't do Bitcoin or Forex. Why? Because totally different mas'ala.
The Sheikh mentioned that if there's a khilaf that is mustaqil from before, then it says that the multi-party, if they pass away, then they can't have ijma. So his delil on that is that when the ummah you mentioned before, that لن تجتمع أمتي على ضلالة, it means ummah as a whole, huh? The ummah as a whole. So, but then if he's taking the ummah as a whole,
The mujtahidun يعني.
then as a whole, if someone comes later, then isn't that the ummah having khilaf? Because if you listen to Asr, then if they have ijma' in Asr, then they can't come later. But if you're saying it's the ummah, whether it's the Asr before or after, what if someone does come in that same Asr and has khilaf? Does that make sense?
No. Come, explain it again.
So it says the ummah has ijma' the mujtahideen.
Okay.
So it's the ummah as a whole. So if we're in Asr and we have ijma', when there was khilaf as mustaqil, it doesn't stand because the ummah has had khilaf before.
No, because no, it's not because of that. He's saying we can't have ijma' because that previous khilaf, we can't totally disregard it. We can't totally disregard their opinion. Just because he's died, that imam has died, it doesn't mean that we disregard his opinion, he's saying.
So his delil is that the ummah hasn't had ijma' on it because
There was no...
the ummah can't have ijma' at this moment because there is khilaf within the ummah.
Yeah, that's what he said. That's basically what he's saying.
So then if you use that evidence for what he said here, if you use it for the second one, then can't someone come in the same asr and say that I disagree with that ijtihad that you had?
It's the total opposite. Because in this mas'ala there's ijma'. In the previous mas'ala there was no ijma'.
No, but if the person who had ijma' before they pass away, they disagree. That's what I'm saying.
La, he's not allowed to do that though. Because the ijma' is already there. Because the ijma' becomes binding when? The minute that they agree.
I don't know if it's what Abdillah was referring to, but you said
Sisters, you can ask questions as well if you want. Go.
within the ijtihad, so that masala the ijtihad is specific to the masala. What can you have a masala within the masala, for example, Forex, there's an ijma' that is, let's say, for example, haram. But new technology has come about within that area of Forex that may happen.
That would be a different mas'ala.
You know, the مسألة to do with الاتفاق بعد الخلاف. So if we said there's a khilaf that's معتبر in the عصر الصحابة مثلا, and then we'll say, okay, well, this khilaf is معتبر, then the tabi'in come and they say there's ijma' now on one of those. I had the problem. So essentially what we're doing was dismissing a khilaf to people are a'lam, essentially.
Yeah, we're dismissing an opinion that existed once upon a time.
Right. But then couldn't we say that the khilaf of this or the aqwal of Sahaba is actually stronger in terms of hujjiyah than perhaps the ijma' of the tabi'in?
No, you can't say that. Because the opinion of one Sahabi, sahih hujjah or sahih that is qawi. But when you're talking about ijma', you're talking about a dalil shar'i, ijma' as a whole.
Moving on that point then, because obviously there seems to be two positions in that. Some say obviously it prevents the delusion of a new ijma'. However, that is not completely done with. There's still kalam in that mas'ala. Because Shaykh mentions that, doesn't he?
Mentions what?
He mentions that the fact that there was a khilaf sabiq that is mu'tabar, that is still taken into consideration, right? So then, as an example, so مثلا خروج على الحاكم, some might say, well, some have a difference in that there was a ijma' that came after that, but some could still quote that khilaf, couldn't they?
If you're talking about, you should have just mentioned the mas'ala. Khuruj. if you say there's ijma' and if you say there's no ijma', it makes no difference. Why? Because there's a daleel for it from the Quran and the Sunnah. Even if there was ijma' and you did mention it, هذا من فضول الكلام. It's just you just using it as mashallah to strengthen your opinion, but it doesn't change the hukum. خروج محرم لدليل شرعي أو لنص لآية والحديث, because of an ayah and a hadith. طيب. I think you guys are overthinking it. You've understood it, but shuf, don't try to understand the exemptions. The exceptions. Understand the mas'ala at hand. The mas'ala beforehand is if you have a khilaf at one period of time, that khilaf is mustaqir, is established. You can't have an ijma' after it. That is according to the opinion of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen and some scholars. Lakin wallahu a'lam, the stronger opinion is that you can have ijma'. And the reason why it is the stronger opinion is because all of these evidences that show that ijma' is a hujjah, there's no mention of a previous khilaf. That's one. As for the inqirad al-asr, all it means is if we as mujtahidun agree on a mas'ala, when does the ijma' become binding? That's all the mas'ala is. And because of the answer, there's fruits to the khilaf. If we say our ijma' becomes binding the second we agree, it means number one, that none of us can oppose that ijma'. Secondly, it means no new mujtahid can become a mujtahid and oppose us. However, if we say that we all have to die for that ijma' to be binding, then one of us can come back from our opinion and contradict the ijma'. Why? Because there was no ijma' to start off with. Secondly, that new mujtahid, mashallah, he can also oppose us. Limada? Why? Because there's no ijma'. Khalas, that's all it is. Have you got questions based on that mas'ala? As for this happening, and so on, that's something else that we can have a niqash over. That's something that we can discuss. My main, my goal is that you understand this as it is. Is that understood?
So I think it's just a misunderstanding of Shaykh Uthaymeen's whole.
That's what I'm saying. With the mu'allif statement, I don't mind going back to it 100 times. My main concern is that you understand what is in the matan. And any other mas'ala, we can have a niqash. But there's no point having a niqash if you don't understand what is in the matan.
With your statement, which is the right from myself there, which is what we mentioned earlier, that indicates the weak opinion. Can I say that, according to the discussion we had now, I view that as the strong opinion?
Yeah. And I said to you it's the stronger opinion. Wallahu a'lam. Why is it the stronger opinion though? Because khalas, the ijma' takes place. All of these evidences, did we not study that ijma' is a hujjah? Khalas. So what are we looking for? Are we looking for them to die? Or are we looking for a previous khilaf? No, we're looking for ijma'. As soon as we find the ijma', khalas, we found it.
وقل رب زدني علما